We're back on Capitol tonight. This year's budget has been widely seen as a victory for business. State spending decreased slightly and taxes did not go up. But one of upstate's biggest business groups is skipping its victory lap for the moment and instead turning its attention toward trying to get several other initiatives passed, including mandate relief and a property tax cap. Joining me now is Unshackle Upstate's Executive Director, Brian Sampson. You know him. Brian, it's good to see you back again.
Thank you, Liz. Pleasure to be back.
So you were actually lobbying on this today, were you
Yes.
not? You were having meetings. And what was the general feeling down at the Capitol?
Well, I think first thing we want to make sure is we thank them for the budget, because it is a new step for New York State, something we haven't had clearly in the last 2 years. But what we wanted to make sure is that they understand that we can't just rest on the budget, that in upstate New York we have a huge property tax issue. Our organization has been pushing for that cap for over a year now. But we also understand there needs to be some mandate relief for the local governments and the school districts. So if we're really going to send that message that New York State is open for business, we've got to start tackling these two issues and then tie in the pension reform piece of it as well. Okay,
so none of this is new. I mean, viewers
No.
are familiar with this sort of mantra that you've been talking about for, I don't know, months now, right, since the campaign. The governor, there have been reports that the administration is keenly aware and even maybe a little fearful of the possibility that there will be property tax increases because of the lack of a cap, which we'll go into in a second, but also because coupled with these education reductions. Is that the feeling that you're getting when you have these conversations?
Well, I think there's certainly that fear out there. But again, when you look at the issue, we're going to deal with this for a long time if we don't start to put the cap in place and deal with the mandate relief. What we've been saying pretty clearly all along is a 2% cap is fair, it's manageable, it allows everybody to plan accordingly. But if it's not done soon, even in advance of the budgets that are due in mid-May, you could see an uptick in increases.
Okay, well, and already you're seeing some of the budgets start to take shape. You're seeing some districts start to lay off teachers, even though the governor said that he didn't think that was necessary. For whatever reason, you know, they do or don't have the reserves. They are not cutting the waste and fraud that he thinks is there. The problem here, of course, is that the bill that he has proposed, that 2% cap, doesn't actually go into effect immediately. It wouldn't go into effect until next year. So these budgets that you say, even if we pass them before the May budget vote, May 17th, I think, would not actually impact these school budgets that we're looking at right now. Okay, and also, capping growth is not cutting taxes, right?
That's absolutely correct. Okay. And we're very clear on that, that what the cap does is the cap is that essential hammer that we've been talking about, that we'll get the mandate relief and we'll get the pension relief when the cap is there. It's a real threat. It's not just a talked about threat. It'll be there. Then you can start to address those core cost drivers that have been there for years. The Taylor Law, the Triborough Amendment. We need Tier 6. We need to fix things like Wick's Law and other things that are big cost drivers for our local governments and our school districts.
Okay, but already you have a situation where the governor is walking sort of a fine line, right? He is right now in the middle of contract negotiations with the public employees unions. The teachers are not thrilled with him because he cut education aid and did not extend the millionaire's tax, just like he said he was going to do. All of this in keeping with exactly what he said he was going to do. Okay, but you can only push public employees unions so far before they decide that they're going to abandon you, and he needs them politically eventually. So when you tackle things like Triborough and when you tackle things like Taylor, how far do you think he's willing to push?
Well, I think that's the question that everybody wants answered. I think our organization's perspective is if we're not out there talking about it, it's never going to be on the table. And I think we saw that in some of the recommendations that came out from the Mandate Relief Committee. While they were good and they would have some impact, they weren't good enough for what we really are going to need. So if people don't want layoffs and people don't want increase in classroom sizes and they want all the services, there are a couple of laws in the state of New York that if you fix them, you might not have to see the layoffs. You might not have to see those increases in class size, and that's the Taylor Law and the Triborough.
So are you, coming out of these meetings that you just had down at the Capitol, are you feeling that the administration has the intestinal fortitude to do what's necessary to get those difficult mandate relief options?
I think what we're looking at is short-term and long-term. I think there are going to be some, not easier, but less political short-term mandate relief issues, and then there's going to be the long-term ones.
Okay, what are the short-term ones?
Well, I think we're still waiting to see what they're going to be. But obviously one of the ones that came out was a Tier 6.
Right.
That, I think, is a pretty simple thing to move forward, as long as it's a defined contribution plan, not a defined benefit plan. We've long thought that the taxpayers shouldn't be on the hook for that pension
Which
system.
we did not see in Tier 5, right? That was
Correct.
not what we saw in Tier 5.
Correct.
Okay.
Initially, we had started that conversation, but it did come out as a defined benefit. So for future employees, let's fix that system now. New York already has one of the larger defined benefit plans in the country. That's SUNY and CUNY. So let's make that the product for the new employees. You can see that. You could see things, are there some issues that we can fix on school construction side and public project side? Are there other issues that a labor law, 240, 241, again, that has a big cost driver for projects that are subsidized by state and taxpayer dollars? Let's fix those things so that we can now move on to the bigger issues.
Are you getting a sense of a timeline?
We didn't get that. Again, the mandate relief team that was put in place that has a long-term goal, I think it ends next year. But a lot of the things that we've seen before, the Lundin Commission, the Swazi Commission, they're all out there. It's just, is there the willingness to take them on? Our job is to drive that willingness and work with the rank and file members to continue to push them.
Oh,
to
yeah.
push the
Well, I mean,
second
we
floor.
talked to Nick Pirro, the former Onondaga County executive, and he said, I don't even know why you have these mandate
Right.
relief teams, et cetera. You could just use these blueprints of the
Absolutely.
commissions that you're talking about and try and implement those. I mean, you're really reinventing the wheel. And let's be honest, what that does is buy time. That's a political
Sure.
parlance of buying
Sure.
time. That's what task forces are for. Right?
Absolutely.
So the thing is also, what are you going to do in order? You had mailers, you had a campaign, et cetera. Now you are not part of Committee to Save New York. Is that correct?
Correct. We
Okay.
are not.
They are now advertising. They've got a lot of money left over, and they've got an interesting situation because one of their main components is REBNY, the real estate board, and they've got an interest in the rent control laws.
Sure.
You do not.
Correct.
So what will you be doing in terms of a public component? Will you run another campaign?
We've talked about that, making sure that that is out there. I think we've got some web banner ads that are running right now. We have an e-advocacy program that people can log on and send a note directly to their officials. We'll do what we need to do in order to keep the conversation going. And as we've said in 2010, in 2012, we'll issue another scorecard. And it is up to the rank and file members to choose whether or not they're going to vote the way their constituents want them to vote. And that is for a property tax cap and for mandate relief and to fix the pension system in New York State and to continue budgets that spend less and are essentially devoid of taxes and fees. If they do that, they'll get our support. If they don't, then we're going to educate the voters about really where we think they should be putting their votes.
And will you continue to have the sort of new trio that you had? You put together you put together NFIB and then
Sure.
the State Business Council and then yourself on Shackle.
Yep.
Is that going to stay together, that sort of
I would
new
certainly
relationship?
think so. And bring in new partners. I mean, there's nothing that says it has to just be the three of us. I mean, the business community finally demonstrated that they can work together and they can carry a common agenda, and when we need to, we'll push those common issues. The taxpayers then listened to what we said and went out and made votes accordingly this past election. And so we'll continue to do that where we have that opportunity to partner together, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the same organizations each time. If it's a specific issue, we'll find common partners. We'll work together. We'll advance it. The next time we may not work with them, we may work with somebody else.
And just in parting, Ken Adams today
Yes.
was confirmed, and he is, of course, the former State Business Council president and CEO. Obviously, business is very thrilled to have him on board, but there is the idea that the first time the Business Council ever endorsed anybody in a governor's race ended up endorsing Andrew Cuomo.
Sure.
So this is not a repayment for that, obviously, but they're working very closely together. It's a very difficult job. Do you believe that he's going to be able to rise above the politics, Ken Adams, of all the different parts of the state and unite towards some kind of business agenda for the entire state?
Well, I think as soon as we come to the reality that while, yes, we're all New Yorkers, we do have two very different economies. And I think that's what the regional councils will be able to do, is put the local knowledge at the table, letting them figure out what their niche industries are, what their market segments are, where's the best application of those dollars to create more private sector jobs. Kenneth will be a great person in that role, in that he has traveled the state, he has contacts and people he's worked with throughout the state. So he has that ability to bridge both the upstate and the downstate divide. And it's really not even upstate or downstate, it's really everybody in the New York City. So I think he'll do very, very well. I think the fact that they also are going to do former Senator Albertine today as Ag and Markets Commissioner, those are two people that we think really understand the issues that we have in upstate New York and will be great advocates for us and truly good partners that we'll continue to work with.
Okay, well, as mandate relief sort of rolls along in a rather slow way,
Sure.
Sorry,
Nope.
we will be checking in with you
absolutely.
again. I want to thank you very much, Brian Sampson. It's
Always
good to
a
see you.
pleasure. Thank you, Liz.